Hey guys, Loman02, currently doing a video recording of some Canadian Highlander content. So what you have in front of you is a 100-card unified deck that falls under the Canadian Highlander rules. If you're familiar, it's basically a constructed cube that has a vintage ban legal or vintage ban list legal build set. That said, there is restrictions on how many of the most powerful cards you can play, such that each deck is allowed to consist of 10 points. Pointed cards include, such things as Black Lotus, Moxen, things of those nature. So each deck's limited to 10 points, so you can't just run all of the Power 9 plus a bunch of other broken cards over the history of Magic. As you look at this deck, you may ask what are the points that you're running in this list. Right now I'm running Strip Mine, which is 2 points, Demonic Tutor, which is 4 points, Mind Twist, which is 1 point, and Crop Rotation, which is another point. Currently my deck's short 2 points for this testing build that I've got right here. And I think at some point it's likely to be built out with either a Vampiric Tutor or the Mind Twist will be removed for a single Mox spread, with likely some other changes like Collector Roof out of the deck. So, what you have in front of you is Jund. This is just Jund mid-range with a minor land sub-theme. So, a lot of folks have, with Fastbond going to 0, have been experimenting with a variety of builds on the lands archetype. Some of them more combo-oriented, others, some of them including Fastbond, others not, which this deck is not a Fastbond deck of interest. Fastbond is now 0 points, so any deck can run it without penalty to their 10-point restriction on pointed cards. Coming down in not the last ban cycle, but the ban cycle prior, from 1 point. So I think with the Fastbond style decks, generally speaking, like they tend to be more powerful in the more colors. So like you probably generally go 4 color, including white, or I've seen the blue like kind of like check pile decks that are also lands oriented combo decks. Some mid range, some more all in lands combo. What you got in front of you though is just Jund kind of mid range that has a splash for a land sub theme to kind of give it some further range against matchups that may not be that great. It allows it to have more of an attritional game plan that denies resources while still clocking an opponent with reasonable and generally value-centric threats in the deck. So I've broken this deck down a little bit differently than I typically do. I haven't per se broken it down into piles by function, although some of these piles do kind of go along function as opposed to form or intent in the deck. So as far as mana base goes, this is a 4 basic deck. It runs 2 forest, 1 snow, 1 basic forest, 1 basic swamp, 1 snow swamp. No mountains in the deck. And then has all of the non-basics, the check lands, the fast lands inside of it, as well as a suite of 10 fetch lands to include 1 prismatic vista, plus the 9 fetch lands that are on color, and all of each that are in those colors. As far as utility lands go, because this is a lands deck, we do have access to the Dark Depths combo with Thespian Stage and Dark Depths. We also have Grove of the Burn Willows for recursion on Punishing Fire over here, which if you're not familiar with that combo, Grove of the Burn Willow says tap to add a red or green. Each opponent gains 1 life. When someone gains life, it triggers the activated ability or the triggered ability on Punishing Fires, which allows you to generate a red and then get the Punishing Fire back so you can continually recurse this shock. Which, can kill folks, but it's also very good at dealing with Planeswalkers. It's a multi-for-1 card advantage card for dealing with, like, little weenie creatures. So you can kind of just do it over and over again. It's also not irrelevant that, like, incidental life gain happens a lot in Canlanders, so you can just get it back randomly from that as well. Strip Mine, yep, this is a reason to be in lands. This is a card that will lock folks out, especially if you're doing it once every turn with, a card like Life from the Loam. Where are you at, buddy? Somewhere in here. Oh, near the top here. If you're Life from the Loam, or you also have cards like, where are you at? Ramadap Excavator to get it back. There's no Crucible of Worlds in this deck. As this is a mid-range deck, I'm a little less reliant on the lands combination. You also have Rented 6 as well. But these are kind of all cards that can recurse, like Strip Mine or Wasteland or any of the fetch lands. But don't necessarily have to. And they can also, they can just, blow an opponent out by just blowing up all their lands, or they can just be getting back like a any sort of fetch land to build up your mana base and just get more resources. So, it tends to allow these cards that can be lockout pieces in a lands combo deck just to be value engines as well. So their median game plan's a little bit stronger than they tend to be in the lands decks, which are a little more all in, have higher land counts, more cycling lands. It just tend to be a little more clunky. And I say clunky, I don't mean like they're bad. I mean they're probably more powerful than this deck is, but their floor is a lot lower. So this deck's actually able to deal with, stuff trying to rush it, like Red Deck Wind trying to rush it, or other mid-range. Like, it's going to generally have a pretty good game plan against that. Like, it just has cards that just have high quality on their own. As opposed to, like, the Lands deck, which, like, Fastbond in and of itself is not powerful. Like, Shoddy Offshoot's not really powerful. Gladeheart, Elk or whatever it is, the card that gains 2 life whenever a land comes into play. Not really that great. They're fine, but they're also not singularly powerful. Like, they require the strategy to kind of be built around them. And if they're played independently after an attritional fight, then they're going to be lower quality, whereas the cards in this deck will tend to be of higher quality. You'll be playing stuff like Chandra Torch of Defiance over, Oracle Moldiah. Which, not that Oracle Moldiah is a bad card, it's very strong, but Chandra is a Flame Tongue Kavu stapled to a Jame Day Tome that requires no further input, and a ramp spell, and a Pyretic Ritual every turn. I'm sorry, a Desperate Ritual? Burning Ritual? Whatever the smallest ritual is. Every single turn with terms of inevitability if you don't need to use removal on it, and basically just killing your opponent. So, it's kind of a one-card show. Whereas you have a card like Oracle Moldiah, it's a value engine, but it doesn't kill your opponent. Like, it kills them very slowly, but with 2 a turn if the board's open. As far as cycling lands go, we do have Nurturing Peatland and Canopy Horizon. Green is the predominant color, the strongest color in this deck. I believe like about 40 some odd of the cards are green in this deck. Red is definitely the trailing least important color in the deck, and then black is second. So it's a base Golgari deck. I would really say just green X midrange is what I would tend to call this archetype in general, or would fall into that family. You also have Horizon Canopy. So one of the things I kind of set out to do is I haven't really seen a Jund deck that I was just like amazed by. I've seen 4-color lands, like 4-color non-blue lands. I've seen check pile lands. I think Abzan lands before, folks kind of started diversifying this deck and putting in red for Wrenn and 6 was kind of the staple, because the white cards that Abzan's able to run are a little more impactful in the combo matchup. You have like Thalias, you have Camballs, you have access to some cards like that, even Mind Sensor, like cards that basically deny a lot of the unfair game plans from getting off the ground. Whereas red tends to struggle a little more with that. Like, you have to stretch yourself and play stuff like Collector Oof to be a little more creative in how you hate those kind of decks out. But at the same time, I don't think that Jund is dead in the water against those sort of matchups, because, one, pointings have changed on Demonic Tutor and Black Lotus, such that Black Lotus and Demonic Tutor are unable to be played in the same deck, because Black Lotus is a 7-point card, Demonic Tutor is now a 4-point card. So you can't play them together, and that tended to be the go-to spread for every single combination deck that was really out there. And without that spread, I think combo is taking a decent hit. It's a little less consistent than it once was. And you have a little more time. So how do we bulwark our game plan against that? Well, we do lose a little bit out in that matchup, but I think with it weakened in the first place, you have the ability to go into Jund and not assume, like, not being a strictly worse deck. You also get access to stuff like, Collector Roof. You're definitely going to want stuff like Mind Twist, so you have additional discard effects. And then you have the other hand attack. Like, you've got Kolaghan's Command, which is indiscriminate, but still hand attack. Your Hymn to Turek, and then, like, your Unholy Trinity of, like, Duress, Inquisition of Kozilek, Thoughtseize, Collective Brutality. You have a few ways to interact with the hand zone, which I think gives you a little more range against those style of matchups. And you also have just direct damage, right? You have Chain Lightning, you have Lightning Bolt, so you have some things that can help you clock just a little bit quicker. What's the big pull to Jund, though, over Abzan lands? Well, realistically, I think it's more so the fact that you have the ability to, along a curve, interact with the board more meaningfully. What I mean by that is you do have Chain Lightnings, you do have Flame Slashes, you have Angrath's Rampage, you have Dreadbore, you have a Braid. Like, you have these cards that Abzan's not going to have access to actually deal with the fair deck. So I think it generally tends to mean that the Jund-style deck is going to have a better median game plan against other fair decks, like other decks that are not looking to storm you out, at some loss in the unfair matchups. So I think you assume more risk in the unfair matchups, but I think you actually gain a little bit in the fair matchups, because Thalia really isn't, like, exceedingly great against fair matchup decks. Neither is Camball is actually pretty bad. They're both legends. They get bounced by Caracas, which, again, is another card we're playing in this deck. Speaking of which, where is Caracas? So it's in the removal pile. So I think you gain a little bit in that. You also get stuff like Punishing Fire, which is really good against other fair decks. You can just knock out their little creatures, knock out their planeswalkers. It almost acts like a Creeping Tar Pit that can actually kill creatures, too. So you got to get access to that. A lot of the 4-color land decks have started playing Gamble. They've started playing Wrenn and 6. I think Punishing Fire is also decently common in them. Maybe Kolaghan's Command. But they don't have, like, all the low-end burn. Like, they maybe have some of it. But oftentimes it's the detriment to their own mana, right? Because, like, you're going to still be playing Dark Depths. You're still going to be playing your Thespian Stage, which are liabilities in terms of, like, mana base. They're not... You don't count them as lands in the deck. So at the end of the day, I think what you get is a more low-end kind of controlling build of midrange that is able to interact pretty effectively along a curve and has more ounce to interacting with the board than Abzan does. That said, I think it is a slightly less effective prison deck against the unfair decks, but I do think it has some strategic advantage when it comes to playing against fair matchups. So, let's jump into the actual deck in front of you outside of like the strategy for why you'd want to even play Jund, because that's kind of the question I had for myself, is like, why would I want to build this deck if I could just build Abzan lands or if I could build 4-color lands? And I think the answer to me is it's just that. It's like, I'm playing a lot more fair games of Magic. I want to have more control over the early to mid portions of the game. And have a better median game plan against other aggressive decks and other mid-range decks and other control decks, whilst losing out on some of the combination style decks. I also have more consistent mana than going 4-color, right? So, jumping out of this first lands pile right here, and the reason we're playing these is because we have cards like, we have cards like Crop Rotation, which is, again, it's gone up in a point. We have cards like Gamble, Life from the Loam. So we're looking to get these cards, like these powerful cards, in our graveyard, and then continually get them back in return. So basically strip mine someone every turn, make a 20/20, get back Punishing Fire, wasteland them every turn, draw cards off of our lands after we've been established, and then just basically trip them out that way. Typically speaking, how the deck will win is you'll get like a 2-drop and a 3-drop or a 4-drop down, and then you'll just start strip mining their lands and keep them from casting more relevant spells, whilst you beat them down with about 5 to 6 power in play and they just die. That's typically speaking like how you're going to look to make it work. You're not really always all in on just trying to strip mine them out of the game. Generally, you just do it 2 to 3 times. That's enough of a tempo gain that your cards on board win. In a way, it's kind of like a non-blue time walk. It's kind of how I treat it in this deck. It's not really a pure lockout. It's just kind of edge advantage to you. Forces them to draw lands, in which case they're not drawing relevant spells. They're playing out of hand at that point. And typically through that attrition, like you're able just to kill them. This next pile here is the 1-for-1 card advantage cards. It's kind of what I'm going to call it. And I've got it kind of broken down into like 2-for-1, 1-for-1 advantage, but not quite. And I'll kind of jump into how I've done that. This 1-for-1 advantage, I guess Caracas is technically almost 2-for-1 advantage against strand cards. I'll move it over here. Let's start with the discards. You have Duress, Duress, Inquisition of Kozilek, Thoughtseize, all fairly similar effects. They all do something a little bit different, but all very, very powerful. And for 1 mana, you generally don't take these out of decks that are base black, that have black in them. Fatal Push, same thing. It's just very efficient removal for the rate, very powerful, efficient removal for the rate, and it generally tends to trade up in mana. Same with Chain Lightning, Flame Slash, Lightning Bolt, and a Braid to some extent as far as the burn goes. 3 damage for 1 or 4 damage for 1 as the case may be is very good. A Braid, 3 damage for 2 with the flexibility to destroy artifacts is very powerful, because one of the matchups this deck will have a difficult time with are those decks that produce a lot of mana very rapidly and cast powerful spells before more typical or linear progression of mana would allow them to cast it. So that's why you'll see we have a kind of a hedge against some of these artifact decks by having cards like a Braid, which in general I think should be played in almost every red deck. Angrath's Rampage, which I don't think should be played in every red and black deck, but I think is pretty good in this one, because one, we're looking to kind of grind folks out, and we're looking to attack their mana base, so they're going to get stuff down early, and you're going to need to be able to deal with it, whether that's in the blocking step, whether that's by directly killing it with like Flame Slash, or Forked Bolt, or something like that, or Angrath's Rampage. Or maybe Angrath's Rampage is dealing with like an artifact they resolved early, maybe it's a Mox, and you just want to get rid of it to kind of cut them down on mana before you start strip mining them, and allowing your onboard advantage to kind of just ride that onboard advantage out to win the game. But this card just has very high flexibility. It has low selection, but it has very high flexibility. So if like the most relevant thing they've done is play the True Name Nemesis out, you can make them sack it. If they have a Walker, they've gotten down a 3-mana Walker on turn 2 or something like that, make them sack it. Same thing with like creatures or artifact mana. Just very good that way. Clutch of Brutality, this card is also exceedingly powerful. In general, it tends to be pretty good value. You can discard a land with this and just get it back with Life from the Loam or Raminep Excavator, or Ren and 6. So this card is very, very good. It has pretty great application against the aggressive decks. As far as gaining life, getting rid of relevant sorceries, and killing their small creatures. It just has a good range, and the card tends to be played in every black deck that's out there. Dreadbore, again, I kind of like this in this deck because we're not the most aggressive of mid-range decks. Like, our creatures are more value-oriented. There's a couple that are purely aggressive, but generally speaking, it's just like because they're like the top hits, like Tarmogoyf, you kind of see off over there in its own pile, because it really doesn't have inherent advantage. It's just big and tough and hard to kill because of its size. But that said, like, not all of our creatures are like that, and sometimes they'll just get a big thing through, like, the medium-style decks will resolve a dragon or whatever, and, like, you just need to kill it, and this does that. It also deals with walkers. which because we're not on white, we don't have Vindicate or Anguished Unmaking, so we're kind of relying on Dreadbore to help do some of what those cards would typically do. Same could be said with like a Maelstrom Pulse. This card is the Abzan decks do have access to this card, but this is kind of like a slightly downplayed Vindicate. But it can deal with walkers, allows you to do that. Same with Assassin's Trophy. This can actually even deal with lands, which is kind of nice. I mean, although they're going to get another land out of it, I mean, blowing up a Tolarian Academy is still very powerful. Abrupt Decay, again, just very powerful removal. It's generally going to trade up for a 3-mana spell at 2 mana, which is a good rate. Next up here, and these are all 1-for-1 cards. Like, they're either 1-for-1 or X, or 1 for X. Like, Collective Brutality is not really a 2-for-1 card. Sometimes it can feel like it in certain matchups, but it's not. This next pile is just the walkers. These are all really card advantage cards, so they could go in this pile of 26 cards right here. Red and 6, a value engine for 2 mana. Folks have started splashing this cards, possibly in decks they should not. I do think it's kind of a staple in the lands decks. Like, I think you should be playing this card in the lands decks. It's probably one of the best things you can be doing. And honestly, even if you're not in the lands deck, if you're in a deck that can cast this card, you should probably play it because it is just stupid. Most decks are playing fetch lands that are playing even 2 colors, even if they're just a red-green deck. The fact this thing can kill mana dorks is great. The fact that eventually it just kills your opponent by giving you the ability to recast everything in your yard is great. And just returning a land every turn is very, very powerful. It's a very powerful effect for 2 mana. It's essentially a 2 mana Crucible of Worlds that does more. Which I don't know what there's not to like there. Moving on to the Last Hope, this card is absurd. We're still a 27 creature deck. Most of our creatures are kind of like spells, so when they resolve, they generally tend to have like powerful effects, and/or they're just creatures that need to be dealt with because they'll kill folks fast. So getting them back is pretty good if they die in combat or get blown up with removal. This also kind of just tends to brick wall threats that your opponent may get down early and/or kill them, and eventually it's just a clock. Like against control, if you resolve this thing, they're probably going to die to it unless they like Oblivion Ring it or whatever. Liliana the Veil. As you can see in this next pile, like we have a lot of 2-for-1 cards. So in general, we're going to be able to grind folks out. So discarding in this deck, I don't think is a big issue because so many of our cards are designed to get 2-for-1 advantage off of them that having to discard is really not as big a deal because a lot of other decks will be playing singularly powerful cards that don't per se get more cards off of them. So I think Liliana is like one of its most powerful like in a deck like this or in like Abzan where like you have a lot of grindier mid-range cards that basically replace themselves in some way, shape, or form. Either by literally replacing themselves or by like dealing with something else that your opponent had so that they're down a card already, and by hitting both hands they're going to be down further than you are. Yeah, and being able to kill something just force them to sack something is amazing. The -6 I don't think I've ever done in this deck, but the card, it could happen. I mean, it's probably not going to happen because in general I think the game will tend to end before you get to the ability to -6 on this thing, or they'll start trying to deal with it before it gets there. So yeah. Garruk. Alright, so this is a Mana Dork deck. Over here in this 9 pile, you can see I have a bunch of Mana Dorks, and I'll kind of relatively quickly talk them. But because we're a Mana Dork deck, I think Garruk was right at home. Garruk is just so powerful. Like, one, he ramps you up to have a 2-spell turn earlier. He can ultimate on the very next turn, which generally means your opponent is very dead, especially if you have like 2 to 3 creatures out. And/or he can just make a beast, make a 3/3. Every mode on this card is very, very powerful. This card is kind of just canon. I think in most green decks, you should probably run it because it just kills folks fast, and it kind of allows you to do everything you want to do in this style of deck. Chandra, this is a card I wasn't playing for a while, but I was like, why am I not playing this card? I'm just being a dummy. Like, this card is just ridiculous. It's a Flame Tongue Kabu mixed with a Library of Alexandria that does not require you to have 7 cards in hand, that also makes mana, that also ultimates to kill people. It just does everything. I mean, it does everything that a deck like this, a Jund deck, would want to be doing. It kills stuff, it makes mana, it kills stuff, it ramps you, and it draws more cards. Like, and/or it just like kills the opponent, like eventually. Card's just absurdly powerful, and like I said, all these Planeswalkers can technically go into this pile right here. I just separated them for the sake of showing them off a little bit separately. So, lands that are 2-for-1s. Raging Ravine and Treetop Village, I think you have to be looked at as 2-for-1s. Yes, they are slow, but they are cards that provide you mana over the course of the game, and then eventually just turn into threats that kill people, which in my opinion is kind of taking up both a mana slot and a threat slot. And while a lot of folks would not say that's a literal 2-for-1, in a lot of ways in decks like this, it's going to be a 2-for-1 advantage. Yes, you assume some risk and tempo by playing them early, But the fact that you could just have these turn into legitimate threats that like really kill folks in the mid to late game, are not prone to wrath or sorcery speed removal, is just very, very powerful. And I've been really happy with these cards. Like I've killed a few folks at Treetop Village. I think I've killed one person with Raging Ravine. Like these cards have just been good. I've been very happy with how they've kind of turned out. Mind Twist. Again, I'm actually short of 2 points in this list right now. And I think it could either be cutting a Mind Twist and putting in a Moxen, or going with a Vampiric Tutor in the deck. I'm not really sold on either option right now, though, because I actually do like Mind Twist a lot in this style of deck. I think it gives it a little bit of an edge against certain decks that it has a bad matchup against. And in general, like, because we're a Mana Dork deck, like getting this to turn into like a Hymn to Turek for 3 mana is honestly not that bad. Randomized discard is obviously a little more powerful than like casting something like a Mind Rot. 3 mana to force your opponent to discard 2 cards at random. It's not exceedingly powerful. But when you think about how much advantage this deck's looking to grind over time, it's going to all add up. It's just going to chip away at the resources every turn. Like every turn you're looking to try to get a 2-for-1, and if you're getting a 2-for-1 every turn, you're going to generally translate that into a win column. A check in the win column for you. Next up, you have Forked Bolt. This is removal, obviously, but it does have the high possibility of getting 2-for-1 advantage against specific decks, against decks that run Mana Dorks, kind of like our deck, or decks that run small, like kind of chippy incremental creatures. Like 2/1s are great, because Forked Bolt just knocks out 2 of them at once. Kills 2 relevant threats that your opponent's probably spent 2 mana to develop, and you're down 1 mana and 1 card. It's pretty absurdly great. And worst case, it just bolts them for 2, bolts a Planeswalker for 2 in combination with attack to kill it, or just kills 1 creature. Grim Lavamancer, this card is also absurd. You tend to see this in everything from red deck wins to like medium red to even this deck. This card is just great value. It's kind of stood the test of time. 2 damage is a ton. We're going to be putting a lot of cards in our bin, because we're looking to trade off resources. We're looking to entomb Life from the Loams and put stuff in the graveyard, to get land, like get advantage from our graveyard. So this card will tend to be live in pretty much every game you play. Sylvan Library, yep, you tend to draw cards off this thing. This is kind of like a green Ancestral Recall that also kind of helps you find what it is you need in your mid-range deck at that given specific time. But yeah, this card helps you win control matchups. Against combo, you're just going to draw with it because your life total in general doesn't matter that much against them. And even in the mid-range matchups, you're going to tend to draw a few cards off it because it's just, you're going to win more games not due to your life total, but due to having more resources. Like, your life total will not start depleting rapidly until one side or the other runs out of resources, is generally what I tend to find. Hymn to Turek, again, just 2-for-1 advantage. Randomized discard for 2 mana. Very powerful. Double black can be kind of challenging at times, but this card is just absurdly good. Wall Blossoms, this card may look kind of odd in this deck because it doesn't attack, but I think one of the issues that like these style of decks tend to run into is like the hyper aggressive decks can tend to kind of run them over. Like if it's just like turn 1 Goblin Guide, turn 2, double 1-drop, turn 3 2-drop plus 1-drop, you can run into issues with those sort of draws. I mean, you have ounce to them because you have a Demonic Tutor, you also have Tainted Pact, and you can find your Toxic Deluge or your Kolaghan's Command to blow up some artifact creature and blow up another creature that has 2 toughness. But oftentimes you're a little bit slow. You're a little more value-oriented. And this card right here just kind of stonewalls a lot of those decks, or they're forced to use pump spells or burn spells to finish it off in combination with an attack. 4 toughness is an awful lot, and the fact that it replaces itself makes it pretty strong. So I think this card's fine here. If there was a better card that had 2 power and maybe 2 toughness or 3 toughness, and it drew a card, I'd probably consider it. But I think this card is just fine here. I think this is a card that could be replaced. But at the end of the day, I've honestly always been pretty happy with Wall of Blossoms just as a blocker to kind of hold the ground down and just basically force my opponent to commit more to the board so that I can get more value out of my cards like Plague Engineer, Toxic Deluge, or just get more hidden information out of the way. Life from the Loam, this is one of the more important cards in the deck, and kind of in the archetype, so Life from the Loam is going to allow us to get back 3 lands. It has Dredge 3. You're putting these powerful lands right here, and these fetch lands over here, into the bin. You can get Life from the Loam via Entomb, via Gamble, via Tainted Pact, Demonic Tutor, you name it. There's a lot of ways to gain access to the card in the deck. And once you do, it tends to just become an engine, and you probably only use it once or twice before the game's over. This is not like the pure land style deck where you're just trying to Life from the Loam for 10 turns and just blow up everything and eventually kill them with a 20/20. Sometimes you randomly win with Merit Lage, even though she's not really a primary game plan. She's kind of if you happen to have access to Merit Lage quickly, you'll get it off the Dark Depths Thespian Stage combo. But if you don't, then you'll just grind them a couple times to this thing while you're beating them with your Grim Lavamancers and your Raging Ravines or whatever you may have on board. Punishing Fire, again, I've already kind of talked this little minor combo. It's just really good removal and really good Planeswalker control. Dark Confidant. When you break this list down by converted mana cost, we do not have a lot of really heavy drops in the deck. We have one Primeval Titan, one Titania, and then I believe 4 4 drops. We have Chandra, Garruk, the Bloodbraid Elf, and Huntmaster of the Fells. Everything else is 3 mana or under. We have 36 lands, so this thing is in general not going to do that much damage to you. We have significant life gain in the deck too, and I think Bob just wins you enough free games against certain decks, like against controlling decks, blue-white decks, blue-red if they choose not to blow it up for whatever reason. Like, you can just win you the game against them too. Basically, if this thing gets to activate twice, if it gets to trigger twice, like, you're probably not going to lose the game. Unless you're like, it gets like red deck wins or something like that. But you're probably blocking if you're playing against a deck like that. Like, this card oftentimes is just a chump blocker against aggro decks, so you can kind of get more time. Scavenging Ooze. This card's great against Reanimator, great against Storm, really great in like almost every damn matchup you could play. Like, great against Control that can kind of like stop them from delving. Mid-range, it just becomes a very big threat. It's just hard to kill in general with like red base removal if you have like an untapped step with it. Card's just really good. Reclamation Sage. We don't have access to Knight of Autumn in this deck, so we're playing Reclamation Sage. This card is kind of a replacement for that card. And I think just the given versatility of being able to blow up any artifact or enchantment is just very good, and getting a body along with it, just kind of chump block for a turn or block and like trade with something for a turn, is very good as well. For 3 mana, it's a great rate. Coolgan's Command. Yeah, this card kind of just does everything this deck wants to be doing. Gets back creatures, forces them to discard, does damage, blows up artifacts. Just does a little bit of everything. It does two of a little bit of everything, and, you get to choose. So this card's generally always live. Plague Engineer. This card can be a Wrath versus certain decks, but oftentimes it's just going to deal with like the most Newsome thing. Like a Bitter Blossom just dies hard to this. True Name Nemesis can be just, utterly ranched by this thing. This thing just deals a lot of stuff, and it's not targeted, so I tend to really like it. And it's not unilateral, so like my own Mana Elves, if like I'm playing against like Craterhoof, are not going to get killed if I play this thing and I have Mana Dorks in play. But if I can get like 1 to 2 of their Mana Dorks, like generally speaking, you're going to probably win that game. Toxic Deluge against the rush style strategies, having effects like this are very, very powerful. The other thing about Plague Engineer is it also just trades very well. It's death touching 2/2. So the fact that it can like kill a few things then trade with a bigger thing is like really strong. T-Del, just kills stuff. Kills a lot of stuff all at once. Eternal Witness, so we don't have access to the Renegade Rallier in this deck, so we're not playing white, but Eternal Witness is a pretty close second to that card. I think that card's probably a little bit better because it's a little more tempo impacting. But this card can get back anything, so like, if it's like your Demonic Tutor or your Tainted Pact, you can get back a spell with it. So it's a little more powerful, but a little less tempo-oriented than the Renegade Rallier. But this card is really good. I've won quite a few games with this card. It's kind of like a secondary Kolaghan's Command in a way. Generally tends to get back a creature or a high-impact tutor or spell. Kitchen Finks, very good against aggressive decks, other mid-range decks, control decks. This card is just hard to kill, gains a lot of incremental life, and attacks for not an insignificant amount of damage. Courser Crewfix is another value engine. Pulling lands at the top of your deck is very good. If you have access to playing them out of your graveyard, you can also do that to kind of control what you're top decking next. Via fetch lands, Tireless Tracker, again, card engine that also beats down and kills folks very quickly. This card is very powerful and does a lot of damage for not very much mana. So it's just very, very low or very high floor and a very high ceiling, like just good median card. Red Map Excavator, just a good value card. You're generally going to have a fetch land or a utility land of some sort in the graveyard that you can get back with it. So the card tends to be very good. It kind of complements the lands packages in the deck. Huntmaster of the Fells. So this card is almost impossible to read over there, but it's a 2/2 that makes another 2/2 when it comes to play a 2/2 wolf, and you gain 2 life. At the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast during the last turn, then you transform this card into a 4/4 that does 2 damage to target opponent and 2 damage to a creature that opponent controls. If 2 or more spells are cast, then you flip the 4/4, the Ravager of the Fells, back over into the 2/2 that makes another 2/2 and gains you 2 life. So basically, this is a value engine. You flip this card back and forth. And I've oftentimes flipped this card in fair matchups. It's really great. Against aggressive decks, pretty great because you just after you have it in play, you block with the 2/2 token that it makes. Flip it over on the next turn after not casting spells, probably leaving up instant speed spells. Allow it to flip, eat one of their creatures, do some damage to them. Then you cast some instant speed spells on their turn, flip it back over, get another 2/2, gain 2 more life. It's just very hard to kind of race. It's a good racing card. And honestly, I haven't played with it that much.
like since it was like available in draft, and like possibly in like some 4-color blood like Eurolander decks. But I was playing with it the other night, and I was like, man, this card's great. Actually, I played it with it tonight and the other night, and I was like, man, this card's just great. Like against fair decks is really good. Bloodbraid Elf, I'm not convinced this card should be in here. But I kind of enjoy playing it, and the card has a little bit of a nostalgic factor, and it's not so far from wrong that like I can't get away with it. Card's just very good. I mean, it's still a 2-for-1. The one thing that it kind of does sell me on like playing a BBE in this deck is that it has haste and can definitely threaten Planeswalkers quite well, and kind of complements like some of our independent removal selection, like Dreadbore, Assassin's Trophy, Maelstrom Pulse, Ingress Rampage, to kind of deal with walkers. Because one of the things I don't want to have happen in this deck is my opponent to get down like a value-based engine, and then just like run me over with a value-based engine. And walkers are just value engines. You need to deal with them. And because we're only a 27 creature deck, like we're not the most like threat heavy deck. Like we have good threats, but like they tend to be more value oriented. I kind of wanted something more like this that like I could put down, like it forces them to deal with it plus probably another card, or I find another card that deals with what I wanted this thing to deal with in the first place. And it's just kind of nice that way. Titania, pretty common lands card. This thing's just absurd. Just an absurd beating. It's generally 10 to 15 power the turn it comes down, which is generally lights out unless they wrath the board. Primeval Titan, same kind of thing. I mean, normally it's going to get Dark Depths combo or Strip Mine or Grove of the Burn Willows to control the board. Just very, very hard to deal with. Caracas, yeah, off-color land, legendary land in this deck. This card just deals with so much, though, that like you kind of like it. I do have Titania that I can bounce with it, but otherwise, like most of my creatures have been chosen to not be legends, or I've chosen that they should not be legends in this deck because, one, I don't want to die to someone else's Caracas. And two, like, why give someone that ability to do that? Like, Caracas is such a tempo impacting play. Like, if they play like a Gitrog monster out and I just go Caracas, bounce your Gitrog monster, like they're pretty much the game's over. Like they just got wrecked. Or Scarab God, like Caracas, kill your Scarab God, or bounce your Scarab God. Like they committed 5 mana to do nothing, essentially, which is a pretty big time beating. We already had the walkers. So this next pile is kind of like the card selection / tutoring pile. This is a Faithless Looting deck. I kind of like this card in here because we are a lands-based deck. We're going to have some cards that are kind of stinkers on their own. Like Dark Depths is really, really bad on its own. Same with like Thespian Stage. Like on their own, like you'd rather just get rid of those and find new cards, and then get them back later with your Life from the Loam. Entomb finds Life from the Loam. Finds a specific land. Finds Punishing Fire. Can find a specific card if you have like specifically Eternal Witness to like reroute that specific card. Just all around a very powerful tutor for 1 mana, and because we're on Life from the Loam, like we could just set up a value engine for basically free. Same thing with Gamble. Gamble is really good to find lands, to find Life from the Loam. You can even find Punishing Fire as well if that's what you're looking to do. Crop Rotation finds any land you may need in the deck, so it can complete the Dark Depths combo, can find the Strip Mine, can find the Grove, can find one of these like lands right here that just redraw themselves, can find Caracas to bounce a legend, can find just a fetch land if you're kind of short on one color, you name it. So it finds a lot. Elvish Reclaimer, this card, 1 beats down, it becomes a 3/4 like a mini Goyf. It also just finds you lands, finds you exact lands. They're going to come into play tapped, they're going to cost 2 to find, but it's pretty low commitment. For 1 mana plus 2 more, you can find any land in your deck. That's pretty strong in my opinion. Basically a one-time Elvish Reclaimer here. You have Expedition Map, which is a little bit strategically strained in this deck because I am playing Collector Roof, which I'll talk momentarily. But Expedition Map finds any specific land as well, and I think you want to have access to your lands, specifically in a deck that has the ability to continually recurse them. So being able to find Strip Mine is pretty good. Tainted Pact, Demonic Tutor, they have similar effects, excepting Demonic Tutor is always going to be better. Tainted Pact, because we're playing a slightly higher synergy mid-range deck, can't exile essential components. Like you could exile your Dark Depths and then like eventually draw your Thespian Stage and kind of be shit out of luck. But oftentimes, like Tainted Pact's still going to be great. Like you're generally looking for something specific when you cast this card. And if you're not, like, why are you casting it? Like, you probably already have a good winning hand. Why cast it at that point? Unless you need to cement it or something, or like I don't know, find a Mind Twist to like cement your position. I don't know. But yeah, these 2 cards just find whatever you want them to find, and they tend to be really good. Sylvan Scrying also in here to find specific lands for 2 mana. Eldritch Evolution. This is kind of like a miniature natural order, and I'm not convinced that like this deck shouldn't or couldn't possibly look to like cut the Mind Twist and maybe even cut Crop Rotation and just run Natural Order. The problem with Natural Order being a point at this point in time is that I can't run Strip Mine, Demonic Tutor. I can run Strip Mine, Demonic Tutor, Natural Order, but I can't run Crop Rotation on top of that. And I think it really depends on how you want to commit in the deck. Natural Order is a far more powerful card than Crop Rotation is. Crop Rotation is a lot more flexible, though, I tend to think, in this style of deck. So I tend to think I like it more. Natural Order is more of a high roll card. We are running Mana Dorks, so like it would not. If I could play it for free, I'd probably play it. Because being able to find Primeval Titan on turn 2 or 3 is very, very good. It generally tends to win games. But right now I've kind of committed to this point spread. I am too short, like I was saying, and I think you could probably put Vampiric Tutor in this deck and be happy with it, happy enough with it. I haven't included it yet because I kind of have in mind that this deck should be like more so value oriented than combo oriented. And to this point, it's worked out pretty well for me, and it's really more set up to do that. It's more set up to kind of like follow a good median game plan. And Vampiric Tutor is card disadvantage, and generally it's going to be more empowered the more powerful your deck is. If we were to do that, though, I would definitely cut Faithless Looting probably for Vampiric Tutor, and then just run it in the deck. And what would it generally be finding? Probably like stuff like Life in the Loam, or maybe just like really good threats, EOT, on my opponent's turn. I'm not sold that's correct, though. Greens to Zenith, Eldritch Evolution, just finds good stuff when you need it. These are all just Mana Dorks, so the next pile here is all Mana Dorks. The only one I'll really talk is Deathrite Shaman. This card is just a 1-mana Planeswalker, so you should probably play it. As far as 2-mana mana producers go, I have Sylvan Caryatid and Lotus Cobra. The reason I'm not including Paradise Druid is because, one, I don't think I need that much ramp, and two, like I kind of like Sylvan Caryatid a little bit better than Paradise Druid in this deck because it blocks pretty well. It does not attack, but it blocks really well against the aggressive decks. And then Lotus Cobra just has a much higher ceiling on it than both cards do. Like you play a fetch land with this, and like that's 3 mana on the spot out of that 1 land. The rest of these are just kind of just run-of-the-mill Mana Dorks. You have your Birds of Paradise, your Llanowar Elf varieties, Noble Hierarch with Exalted, but otherwise not really anything cool. Collector Roof. So this card's in this deck. This card could technically be over here in the 2-for-1 advantage pile. Its floor is pretty low. That's the reason I put it into its own pile is because its floor is pretty low. It's really kind of a tech card that I am kind of into because I have access to this and this right here, plus Demonic Tutor and Tainted Pact. And there are certain decks that this card just shuts down. There's certain cards that there's certain decks that this card is basically the moat against. Like you just cast it and their deck does nothing. Like it does nothing. They're fucked. Like they just lose the game. There are other matchups where it's just a 2/2 that just blocks, attacks, trades. Maybe you Eldritch Evolution it into something good, but like it doesn't do all that much. It's kind of a 2-for-1 card, but it's a really high variance card. Like it's either really the good or it's really bad, or it's either really good or it's like very medium. Tarmogoyf is just huge. It's not a 2-for-1 advantage card. It's really just a singularly powerful threat. And I don't think it really belongs in like the 2-for-1 pile. I don't really know where it belongs. It's kind of just its own thing. You could replace it with like something like Grimflayer if you're really inclined to like kind of up the synergy of the deck, but I just think Tarmogoyf is so powerful on its own that it's kind of hard to cut. Like you're just like, yeah, I'm still gonna play a 2-mana, 5/6 or whatever. It's just too big and clock's too fast to really ignore, and it blocks well too. It does everything kind of well, as well as a vanilla creature can do. And then all the fetch lands right here. So 10 fetch lands kind of work with Wrenn and 6, work with the Remnant of Excavator, you name it. So, this is Jund Midrange Lands, guys. The deck's been running pretty well for me. Like, I've been tuning on it for the last, week or so, kind of on and off. I've been pretty happy with it. Looking at it now, I'm not convinced that, maybe I should be playing, 1 to 2 filter lands. I do think the black-green filter land's probably correct in this deck. I don't think the black-red filter land, or the red-green filter land needs to be in here, but that could also possibly be included as well, over probably one of the speed lands or something along those lines. Anyways, guys, I'm going to go on a quick pause, and I'll be back momentarily, and we'll cover some gameplay with this Jund Midrange Lands deck. Alright, guys, we're back, playing as Maximilian Pegasus here. And this hand's perfectly acceptable. It's kind of slow, but it's grindy, it's good. It does a little bit of everything that I want to be doing with this deck. So I just play out my Elvish Reclaimer and say go here. And it's got good mana. OP, Thought Seizes me. I go ahead and fetch. Go ahead and just collect Brutality, then eat their mana leaks. They're on a bug deck. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at their hand. Their hand consisted of Eternal Witness, Nibble Obstructionist, Wasteland, 2 other lands, Twilight Mire and Drown Catacomb, and then Mana Leak, which I take their Mana Leaks. It's the only legal target they have. Go ahead and attack them for 1 here. I could have discarded a bunch of lands there to like make my Elvish Reclaimer bigger. One of the issues I had with how I played this game was that I played it too passively. I think this specific first game in this match, they play out Wasteland, which we knew was in their hand. They don't blow up the Strip Mine though, which is interesting to me. I would think in general they would, but they probably possibly wanted to leave up the Nimble Obstructionist. I go ahead and just blow this up to force them to Nimble Obstructionist on their upkeep. They go ahead and do it, which isn't a bad deal. But I also know they have Eternal Witness, so I can't just go and set up the Dark Depths combo here. I could at least get one half of it, but I can't set the whole thing up. I think at this point I probably should have just started attacking them. I think that would have been a stronger line of play, to be honest. And then I don't tap down there, because if I tap down, my Thespian Stage becomes vulnerable to Wasteland. I can't use it to clone a basic land. So again, I think I'm playing this too passively, to be honest. They play on a creature here, a Jace Vryn's Prodigy, but I have removal to deal with that. Force them to use their Wasteland, then use my Elvish Reclaimer in response to Wasteland, find the Dark Depths, but I am short on mana here, unfortunately. Play out the Scavenging Ooze. They have a Remand in hand. Or I had a tap land, so they're going to use the Eternal Witness. I wanted to get them to use their Eternal Witness to Wasteland my Dark Depths or my Thespian Stage. Should be okay with here. Although, I think I probably could have played this a little tighter and probably just killed the Jace there. I think that would have been stronger. You gotta attack the Jace, Telepith Unbound, put it down to 5 here. And then leave up access to the Scavenging Ooze. They target with their Jace to get the Ponder back. I just Scavenging Ooze it. They want to do it as a ruse to get down their own Scavenging Ooze and like eat my creatures. So they have a 3/3 versus my 3/3. I go ahead and braid the Scavenging Ooze here, make some mana to pay for the Spell Pierce they drew into, evidently. They exile another one of my cards, a Strip Mine, and I go ahead and attack their Jace to death here. They find a Narset, draw into a Factor Fiction off of Narset. Find a Karakas here. Not a bad find. I attack their Narset, kill their Narset. Feeling still pretty good about this game. Like, I don't think I'm in a horrible spot here. But they're also going to get to Factor Fiction this turn. I end up separating it, Torrential Gearhulk plus lands or the relevant spells. They keep the Torrential Gearhulk. Torrential Gearhulk's not going to be very good against the Scavenging Ooze. The problem is the Ooze is going to not attack very well into the Torrential Gearhulk as well. Plus, they have access to the Eternal Witness. I start just growing this Scavenging Ooze to get it big, so that I ostensibly at some point attack into both the Eternal Witness plus the big fella, the Torrential Gearhulk. Find a Mana Dork here. Not the greatest. So I go ahead and leave my Scavenging Ooze back. I think here I actually sack the Karakas out, which I think is another mistake. I just start eating cards here. I have to at all times leave up a green mana. I can't just tap out a green mana because then they'll just resolve their Torrential Gearhulk. Take damage off this land. I think I still should have sacked this Dark Depths. I think I could have played this a little tighter. I go ahead and play out the Kitchen Finks here. They allow it to resolve after considering for a second. Again, I have to just leave up this green mana pretty habitually until the Torrential Gearhulk's out of their hand. Play on a River of Tears. It's one that I did not expect in their deck. Not a bad card. I just don't tend to often see it as often like the 3-color decks. Find a Gamble, which is not a bad card to find. It allows me to gain access to Life from the Loam, which unfortunately instantly gets countered. That's unfortunate. I go ahead and attack in with the Finks here. They allow it to hit them. I'm trying to bait out the... either get a block off the Creeping Tar Pit or bait out the Torrential Gearhulk. eat their stuff. Just find a treetop village here because I want to actually start attacking them for lethal, a substantial amount of damage. I think I could have done this earlier, and I think I probably should have sacked the Dark Depths here. So they finally go ahead and resolve out the Torrential Gearhulk. I go ahead and eat their Supreme Will. Now they block, which is fine. The Torrential Gearhulk got to eat my card, but I mean it was kind of a free card regardless. It was a land at that point. And I've got them at 7 now, so I'm kind of still hoping to fade some draws they could possibly have. They fire up the Creeping Tar Pit to get some damage in, which means to me they probably drew removal at this point. They play on a Seedborn Muse. I go ahead and sack another Caracas here, find the Raging Ravine. Again, I should have done that with the Dark Depths. That was a misplay on my part. I do not like how I did that. I think if I had played this more aggressively, I think I probably could have killed them here. But I think I pushed my advantage that I had the mid-game too long into this one. So I play on a Leovold, which now I'm upset I don't have Caracas anymore, because even if they drew a card, it's still going to be a tempo loss to them. They go ahead and get in for 3 more. Start exiling some creature cards out of their graveyard. Sack this to find a Blast Zone, which is not really great at this point in time. So now I'm going to go for an all-out attack and try to blow them out with this Kolaghan's Command that I've drawn. They're down to 1 card in hand. They fire up the Creeping Tar Pit. Line up their blocks. So here I'm going to get to kind of blow them out. I'm going to get to blow up the Creeping Tar Pit and, well, destroy artifact is going to be the Torrential Gearhulk. And then I'm going to kill the Creeping Tar Pit, and in the process, hopefully kill the Leovold. They cast on a Flusterstorm, I guess, just to get me to tap down a little more. So I basically kill their whole board. They find a Courser here with a Spellseeker on top, which is pretty powerful. They unfortunately also have a Tassiger and a Search. So they get access to a bunch of mana here because of Wilderness Reclamation. Managed to force me to give them back a card. I give them back a Gitaxian Probe because they can't cast it right now. I go ahead and sack the Expedition map, find a Woodland Cemetery just to get out of my deck, find another land here. Now I'm kind of getting into a rougher spot because I am forced to attack each turn. And they can line up some pretty decent blocks here. Like they're going to line up a block on the Tasker there, which makes sense. Put him down to 1. So I'm not looking like I'm in a bad spot here. Not horrible. I give him back a Mana Leak because I figure I'm not going to have to resolve more spells to win with the board as it currently stands. I figure the board itself... I'm giving them basically counter spells, but I think that was like a counter spell, literally, or a Mana Drain. So their hand consists of 1 unknown plus Gitaxian Probe plus counter spell plus Mana Leak. They search for his Kanta here, find a Primordial Mist, which is pretty powerful. They're going to get to throw that down and put 2/2s on the board, which will go back to their hand if they die. I'm sorry, not if they die. They go back to their hand if they exile them, and they can cast them that turn. They still have to pay the mana, though. So they're not in the best of spots, but they're also not in a horrible spot either. All I have to do is 1 damage here, so I'm kind of hoping they can they miss for a turn. They unfortunately find Cryptic Command, which is pretty much exactly the kind of card they needed here. They're able to tap me down, and I just go ahead and tap the Elvish Mystic to gain some life right now to use the mana, essentially. And the game's kind of slipping away because they're going to get 2 more Search for His Kanta activations, which means their possibilities of finding like a way to deal with the board are decently high. They go ahead and search here, find Opt, go ahead and Opt, draw to a man land, creature land. Play out Deathrite Shaman, which I can technically blow up with the Blast Zone, but it would also blow up 2 of my own 1-drops. They get another 2/2 out of this exchange right here, and now they have blockers for my board. And they can activate Tassiger or the Azcanta the Sunken Rune again. They find Go for the Throat, and now I'm pretty sure the game's actually over. I just go ahead and get rid of some of their creatures to gain some incremental life. At this point, I could probably still draw... Actually, no, I know I can't draw Burns. I know they have 1 hard counter. I think it's Mana Drain in hand. The Mana Leak won't do it against most cards that would get me out of this, but the hard counter spell will. They apparently have two removal spells here. So I'm in some trouble. I have nothing going on now. I draw to a Dreadbore, which is too little, too late. I actually don't like them countering this spell here. I'm targeting the Tassiger. I like leaving mana drain in hand. I go ahead and concede it anyways. I don't think it really matters that much, but I think they could probably allow the Tassiger to die here and be just fine and keep that counter up. Either way, I think we flummoxed this because I think we probably could have one, sacked the Dark Depths earlier to get more creature-based lands to actually attack them and finish them off from one. And we probably could have played the hand a lot more aggressively to kind of pressure them, but I didn't really know exactly what my opponent was on. I knew it was bug mid-range of some variety. It also contained counter spells. Did not know it was bug wreck. So they can definitely grind more value into a long game. So my going-in plan for games 2 and 3, if I get to go to 3, are definitely to try to pressure them early and attack their resources early. Try to get them early into the mid games. I think my early to mid games going to be stronger than theirs is, and their long games going to be far stronger than mine is. Quick pause, guys. Back momentarily for game number 2. All right, guys, we're back. Hand's great. I mean, it's got access to any card in the deck via Tainted Pact. Has turn 1 acceleration. Has a land tutor. Has some land destruction. Has a low grade, low rent natural order in it. So, hand's good. Assassin's Trophy's a fine draw. I'm just going to leave up Tainted Pact on this turn and then get the Elvish Reclaimer going by the next turn to find my Strip Mine. They Brainstorm here. Play on a Swamp. Fatal Push my Elvish Reclaimer. I end up exiling the Loam. I actually just take Mind Twist here. I think Mind Twist is just fine. I mean, it's going to be a Hymn to Turk for 3 on this next turn while they're tapped out, which I think is actually pretty strong. I mean, they've got really nothing much else going on right now. They've spent a lot of cards kind of filtering their hand, and we just hammered, 3 decent cards out of their hand. They go ahead and cast that, get rid of my shitty natural order, play on a Jace Vryn's Prodigy. I go ahead and just Assassin's Trophy this. They find their basic forest. I think I could have tapped better there. No, I couldn't have tapped better there. I actually needed all those colored sources to cast that, so I could not play out the Collector Roof. So they're down to 1 card, but their 1 card they have left is the Courser of Crewfix, which is pretty strong. I have a Collector Roof and, a Raging Ravine. So I'm in a kind of a tight spot here. I go ahead and I fire up both. I fire up the Treetop Village plus attack with the Collector Roof. They evidently don't buy that I have interaction for this, but I do. So I go ahead and just abrade this thing and know that they're drawing into an opt. So they opt and don't do anything. They put a card on bottom, but I don't know what they got. And now I'm just attacking them with these creature lands. 4 damage here, 5 damage there. Not bad. So they play another land, don't do anything else. I go ahead and fire up the Raging Ravine this turn, but I believe get Cryptic Commanded, or they tap it or something, they fire ice it. And they disallow it. Okay. They disallow it, so I just attack them for 1. Say, hey, that's cool. They play out a Baleful Strix, which is kind of a cool card, but I kind of have an answer to it in hand already. I just go ahead and Rex Sage this, fire up the Treetop Village and attack. I'm going to wait for them to commit something big to the board before I try to go for a Greenstone Zenith, but I don't even have to. They Mental Note, don't find what they need, and they're dead the next turn. So go low to the ground, go a little more aggressive, and I think we'll tend to be able to get this deck. On to Game 3, guys. We'll check out how it concludes. Alright, guys, back. Hand's just fine. It's got access to all the colors of mana that it could possibly need. It's got a Mind Twist to kind of control the hand zone. It's got some decent early plays like Lavamancer, and it's got access to Strip Mine via Sylvan Library. Search for Azcanta is generally pretty good against like more controlling decks, but I think I have the ability in this deck to become more aggressive. They also got an Urborg in play, which is kind of nice for me because it gives me easy access to this Liliana, and they're also tapping out pretty aggressively. So I feel pretty good about what's going on here. I find a forest because it's going to be a Bayou at this point. Go ahead and just kill off this Baleful Strix and have a pretty significant clock on the board right now. Not really a clock in the traditional sense, but a clock in like, hey, opponent, you got to do something about this. And they do. They blow up my Liliana. I go ahead and blow up their Creeping Tar Pit. They make a blue mana. I go to my next main phase. Play out a Ramunap Excavator, and say go. And basically now, like, they're pretty incentivized to kill this thing. If they don't, they're going to kind of get into some trouble here. If they're just playing land go and doing nothing, like I'm going to continue to blow up their mana. They go ahead and tap this for black. I go to my second main phase to kind of get the mana out of their pool. I actually don't attack here. I figure like if they have a Nibble Obstructionist or a Vendilion Click, I get really punished by attacking there, and I'm not really in a rush. Like I have land death every turn, so like why rush? They go ahead and bounce my thing. Strip mine them again. They're going to be able to flip this as content, but they're only going to get one card out of it before I blow it up with Strip Mine. As it now is a land, I go ahead and try to blow it up with Strip Mine. They go ahead and look. Actually, I'm sorry, they cast Factor Fiction. I give them 3 spells or 2 lands. They take the spells, which is cool with me. I go ahead and cast a Mind Twist here, get 2 of the 3 spells they got off of the Factor Fiction to start with. Go ahead and smack them around for 5 here, down to 11. They play out Tireless Tracker, get a Clue Token. I go ahead and blow up one of their lands, force them to sack the Clue Token to draw a card, and then blow up their creature with Chain Lightning. And then start eating the creatures and attacking for 6 damage this time. So they're on a 1-turn clock. They cycle a Miscalc, and that is just game. So I think this is actually a pretty interesting matchup. I think it's a good matchup. I think this is a good mid-range matchup. Their decks are more on the controlling end, so I think in general it's going to behoove the Jund build that I'm on, which is a little more aggressive. It's more mid-range value, but more on the aggressive spectrum than their deck is, to really kind of put early pressure down, like to attack the resources like we did, but also just continually clock them. And keep them from really getting set up because they have less efficient cards in general, although their card quality is also, like my own, very high. But mine is more capable, I think, of transmuting into tempo-based wins. So I think that's how you got to play this kind of matchup, like against Bug and Jund. But in general, it's a good, pretty much 50-50 matchup that I think either player can win. And in general, it's going to be pretty good, grindy, kind of just fair mid-range Magic. Anyways, guys, quick pause. I'll be back momentarily with the next game we'll be covering with Jund mid-range lands. Alright guys, back playing against Brahms here. Brahms, I believe, is also on Jund, but on more of a big Jund build. That first hand had like 1 land in it, and 1 2-drop, and then like not much else I could cast. This is a much better hand. It's a 3-lander that has access to Tainted Pact and Sylvan Library. So I think it's a much better hand. My opponent is playing something very fast. At the beginning, I think it's medium green. Is kind of what my thinking is, but I believe it is Jund. I draw a Collector Root for the turn, which is going to shut off one of their mana at least. They cycle off a Sheltered Thicket, then play on a tapped land, which means to me they probably don't have a ton of... They probably have a lot more mana than they do threats. I play out Liliana here and just blow up the Paradise Druid and get in for 2 damage. If they play like a Bloodbraid Elf or something, I'm probably in more trouble, but they end up just playing on a Courser. I go ahead and force both of us to discard. They discard a Cradle. I discard my tapped land. I go ahead and just find this Flame Slash, I think like 1 card off the top, to deal with the immediate threat. They play out this Tireless Tracker that we knew about off the top of their deck. I draw into an Eternal Witness, which is a great draw because it instantly gets back this Flame Slash, which again deals with this threat. My plan had been just to minus the Liliana to deal with it, but I didn't have to. I could have plus the Liliana there, but I kind of wanted to have the Sylvan Library to kind of get back up on resources. I've kind of gone low on resources dealing with all their stuff they played. Kind of the rapid influx of stuff forced me to interact with it. So I didn't uptick the Liliana there, which is kind of an interesting choice. I was really going to wait and see if I could get this Sylvan Library down in the following turn before I upticked it because I wanted access to a card draw engine to get back up on resources if they found a way to either kill me or deal with all the stuff I had. As it turned out, it was moot either way. They didn't have anything to deal with the stuff I had. But as you can see, like cards like Collector Roof and like in Eternal Witness, like if there's a thing like Ancient Tomb in play, can really add up quite quick in combination with an Ancient Tomb. I mean, it's essentially 6 power every turn that's hitting them, so it really doesn't give them a ton of time. Anyways, guys, quick pause. Back momentarily for game number 2 versus like I would call it like medium Jund or like Jund big mid-range, Jund ramp. I don't know what their deck's kind of a little different. It's a little different than like the build I've got. It's a little less grindy and a little more like big. It's got like dragons and stuff in it. Quick pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily for the next game. Alright, guys, back. And if I recall, I don't think this is much of a game. I think I have a very strong opener. This is not a keep. This is a keep. You're going to put the Dark Depths to the bottom. Makes sense. Keep a Wasteland plus 2 fixing lands. They cast out a Thoughtseize. Get rid of the Plague Engineer. Yeah, I draw really well this game. I remember this game now. So we get the tap land down. They cast a Hymn to Turek, knock out my green source, which is kind of irksome. Like having my green source is nice. I just blow up their land here to slow them down a bit because I think in general, like I'm gonna want to hit a green source to find my next land. I find a Primeval Titan there. When I say find my next green source, I want to be able to cast Sylvan's Grind to find my next land after that. Find Bayou here, basically. Find a land that finds Bayou. Go ahead and find just Strip Mine here. I could have also found the Grove, but I draw very well in this game. I blow up their duel, get a run in 6, grab back the Strip Mine, and they just concede the game. This is a weird game. So, like, my opponent had a very had 3 of probably 5 hand attack spells in their deck in their opening hand. So, like, my hand got picked apart really well. So at this point, I think we were both kind of off the top deck. As it kind of shows, like they didn't have great mana either. As soon as their one green source was gone, I think their mana was kind of dog shit. My mana wasn't much better, based on how the game played out. With the Hymn to Turek hitting my green source, but I managed to top deck better than they did. Is kind of just what it came down to at the end of the day. And I think in general, like based on the builds, because I've seen Bram's deck post or after playing this game, I think in general my deck will tend to top deck better in this given situation than theirs will, because they have a lot more 4 and 5 drops, and I have more lands per my build. Like given my mana curve, I have more lands. I think they're like a 37 or 38 land deck, and I'm on like 36. But at the end of the day, I have 4 drops and a 5 drop and a 6 drop that I can draw, and I did draw one of them, but then I drew something relevant, which. In this case was probably the single best card to draw. Outside of like Life of Loam may have been better. Yeah, Loam would have been slightly better than Ren and 6, but like not by much. Ren and 6 may even be better than that. I don't know. It's close. Anyways, I have a Strip Mine Recursion lock, and they're not going to get out of it, and they know it, and they just go ahead and pack it in. So not really a cool game the way it ended, but it also kind of showcases the power of this like land sub-theme that this mid-range deck has going on. Sometimes you just win games off of that, and right here is kind of an example of just that. Pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily. Alright guys, back for a game versus Arakasi 01. This hand is not acceptable. It only has 1 land and does not have anything to do on 1. This hand's fine. It's going to go ahead and Thoughtseize turn 1. I'll go ahead and pause it and tell you what was in their hand. So I ended up taking a Liliana of the Veil. Their hand had Hymn to Turek, and it also had 4 lands and a Terramander. The Hymn to Turek's not the most irksome with this hand because I kind of want to get a gamble off. And so actually what I do here is I hymn them. I just hymn them and hit 2 lands. I know they're not going to be able to produce double black on the second turn because they ended up using the island to cast out their Terramander first. I go ahead and hymn here just to gamble here to put Life and Loam in the graveyard so that if I find future land destruction spells or fetch lands, I can get them back. It also fuels my Grim Lavamancer. So they play out a Thief of Sanity, which is going to die right away to the Grim Lavamancer. I go ahead and Life and Loam here, get back 1 land, go ahead and exile 2 cards from my graveyard, and Grim Lavamancer, the Thief of Sanity. They play on a Jace the Mind Sculptor and plus it, which is pretty powerful. I'm kind of hoping to draw a Bloodbraid Elf here. I go ahead and just exile something to damage them a little bit. Get back the Faithless Looting. End up Faithless Looting here. Leave up the Grim Lavamancer to kill this Terramander if I need to. They play out a Rankle, which is kind of an interesting card. I think they're just testing it because it's new. I go ahead and bolt the Jace down to 4. They allow us both to draw and both to sack a creature. I sack out the Deathrite Shaman because I think Grim Lavamancer is going to be more relevant here. I think clocking them is more relevant. And also keeping the Creeping Tar Pit at bay is kind of relevant. The Dreadbore was a really solid draw. I'm going to be able to attack with both and knock out this Jace the Mind Sculptor and then cast Dreadbore to kill the Rankle. Now there are 2 cards, one of which I know, which is Hymn to Turek, which is dead. They fire up the Creeping Tar Pit, hit me for 3 down to 4. I go ahead and draw an Elvish Reclaimer, fire up the Treetop Village, hit them down to 11. They cast Drown in the Lock here to get rid of the Elvish Reclaimer. I think in actuality they probably wanted to save that. Either save it or deal with the Grim Lavamancer. But anyways, we end up just junting them out. We basically just, have enough damage off the Treetop Village, plus can keep the Creeping Tar Pit at bay with the Grim Lavamancer. And at this point, like if they can't do anything to the board, I'm going to dome them, and then I'm going to dome them again. They're going to be down to 2, and I'm going to have a 3-power Trampler that does 1 over, plus 1 off the Elves of Deep Shadow. They can block the Elves of Deep Shadow, take 3. And either way you look at it, they're going to go to 0 or -1. And yeah, that's this first game in this match versus Blue-Black Tempo. Quick pause, guys. Blueback Tempo Midrange, I think is what he calls it, because it's got a Moxen spread as opposed to an Ancestral or a Time Walk spread. So he's playing more like mid-rangey cards and like double Mox spread on it. So quick pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily for the next game. All right, guys, we're back. Yeah, this hand's pretty great. I mean, the only downside of this hand is it does not have access to a fetch land, but I think it's still one that you would generally want to keep. They play out fetch land. Don't hand attack me, which is kind of nice. Get a Lotus Cobra. That's a cool one to pull up. And honestly, I may cast that turn 2 over playing a Wrenn and 6, depending on what they do. If they just do that, I'm going to play Wrenn and 6 pretty absolutely. And just blow it up. Yep, kill the Delver off. They, I think, mulled the 6 here and just did not get... Yeah, they mulled the 6. And did not hit the lands I think they wanted to hit. They have a counter spell there. I just get back my land that I discarded with Collective Brutality. It's kind of another nice upside to Collective Brutalities. Without a fetch land, discarding a land there's pretty low it's pretty low loss. It's a pretty high value play, right? It's just free chicken. End up killing off or getting the True Name and the Snuff out of their hand. They unfortunately, I believe, no, they don't do it this turn. Let's run another land here. Just go ahead and play out the Huntmaster of the Fells. And they go ahead and dismember this thing, going down to, I believe, 14? Yeah, they dismember it. Which stinks, but I might get a 2-2 left behind. They're out of 15. I go ahead and reanimate down to 12. I go ahead and just plus my Wrenn, not getting anything back. Find a Garruk, which is a threat they have to kind of honor. I.e., they have to attack it with their True Name Nemesis, because if they don't, they'll die next turn. Drawn to a Blooming Marsh, which is not great. I make a 3-3 with a Garruk. Pump the Wrenn and 6 just for no value. Hit them for 4, down to 7. And I have 5 burn in hand, so they're pretty dead. They don't do anything here. Go ahead and find a fetch land, kind of nice. Make some red mana off this. Fetch, find, I think, Badlands, yep. Make more red. Cast, or return the land. Cast out the Forked Bolt at their face. They mental misstep it. Cast the Chain Lightning, which puts them to exactly lethal this turn, and they go ahead and concede the game. I played a couple games. Actually, I think this is one of 2 games against Arakasi with this deck, or maybe 3. I think 2 of them I won, and 1 of them I lost. And the reason that the deck lost is I mulled the 5 and mulled the 6. Sketchy 6. But one that I still had to keep, I think, and then a real bad 5. I got 5, like just a 5-card hand. Managed to lose. So I think this match could go either way. I think the blue-black tempo deck definitely has game against this Jund deck, but I think as the game goes longer, the Jund deck will tend to win more often because it has more value-oriented plays that it can make and has more card advantage plays I think they can make. But in general, its threats are going to be a little less like good. Like True Name Nemesis is just a hell of a threat. But they're going to have a lot of cool threats like True Name Nemesis that are just kind of tough to deal with. They're like uber efficient like Delver of Secrets. And, if I just draw the wrong part of my deck and don't draw the removal I need, which is still a significant portion of the deck, then like cards like this can just run away with the game if they're resolved early and backed up with good, effective, or efficient counter magic and removal. That said, I do think, over time, like, I'll tend to be a little bit favored, but I think it's still a good game. I think it still makes for a good game of Magic. Against like the blue-black tempo deck or like Grixis tempo decks, I think in general it's going to be a pretty good solid game. They could go either way. Just depends on kind of how the cards fall and how both players play. Anyways, guys, quick pause. We'll be back momentarily for more games with this Jund build. Alright guys, back playing against BMCG here. This hand looks great. This is like one of the better hands I've seen. It's got access to the lands combo. But unfortunately we're playing against probably Academy. Play on a Mystic Forge on turn 1. Not feeling too good now. I probably should have just gambled. I guess I could have gambled there to high roll, like find like the Collector Oof. I Entomb to find Loam instead, which was possibly wrong. Like maybe I should have just like gambled to try to find Oof there and just shut them off. Like Mystic Forge is really good against Oof though. I ended up finding the Reclamation Sage to blow up the Mystic Forge. My hope is they don't have like more relevant follow-up plays beyond Mystic Forge, but they apparently have access to Tolarian Academy plus a Time Spiral, which is pretty much game over. That was a really strong sequence of cards out of them. Like, I'm pretty much dead on turn 3 here. They find Bolus the Citadel, find a way to untap the Academy, transmute artifact into an Aether Flux Reservoir. If you're not familiar with how this combo works, so it's not really even it's kind of a combo. It's very powerful. Bolus Citadel allows you to cast cards for life. Every time you cast your Every time you cast a spell, you gain 1 life for each other spell you cast this turn. Each spell you cast this turn. So basically, they're going to play their whole deck, and they have, well, maybe not their whole deck. Like they can hit 2 lands in a row. They're going to be able to exile the first land with Mystic Forge. Not to mention they still have 5 cards in hand to try to filter the top deck if they need to. But they're going to gain a buttload of life. They're probably going to kill me this turn with Aetherflux Reservoir, so I just concede. Like I'm probably not going to beat this, especially after they cast a Time Twister, a Time Spiral that is, and got rid of all the work I'd done in the graveyard and then also my hand. So yeah, I'm just really dead here. And I don't think I was going to beat this draw regardless of what I had. I probably would have had like an Abrade on turn 2 to deal with the Mystic Forge, and then maybe I get the time to do something. But yeah, I'm just really dead. This is a tough matchup in general. So we're going to go on a quick pause, guys. I'll be back momentarily for Game 2, and hopefully we can keep a little more intelligently so that we can have some tempo-impacting plays in the early to mid-game to kind of stop their expansion with the Academy deck. All right, guys, we're back. So this is my first hand, and I'm like, this hand's dog shit, but I'm on the play, and it just gets an oof down, and an oof can just show stop them like immediately. So they play on an Izzet Signet, which is great because like I draw a mana elf here, which is great too. I'm going to play that next turn, but this turn I'm just going to get an oof down and start trying to beat them down. They play on a Mox, great. Play on an Urborg, which makes their land not do damage to them anymore. It makes it just turn into a swamp. Draw a pretty much completely dead card in the matchup, Flame Slash. Just play out an Elf here, because Elf is going to allow me to cast the Abrupt Decay or our Mind Twist next turn. I guess Mind Twist is already fixed for here. I just go ahead and cast Twist for 2 to get their last 2 cards. It ends up being an Ancient Den and a Diminishing Returns. They again have access to the Tolarian Academy, but now all of their card draw is just limited now. I like to rest them and get rid of the Wishclaw Talisman. And we're just beaten down with like little idiots here. I go ahead and braid all these artifacts, kind of limit the mana they can make with Tolarian Academy. Like my worry is like they get a card like Walking Ballista, and I'd rather than be able to only cast it for 5 or for 4, or make it a 2/2, as opposed to casting it out for like something more than that. Yeah, they go ahead and dig a bunch and then just concede the game. Collector Roof just won me the game pretty much single-handedly here. So as much as a non-game as we had in Game 1, we had a non-game here in Game 2. And hopefully, at a minimum, like I don't draw my Goozler card, and like they don't draw their top like 10th percentile draw. And we have a decent game in Game 3 because neither of these games were particularly great. They kind of just showcase the power of like having tech cards and just the power of Academy too. Like it's a very powerful deck. All right, guys, quick pause. Be back momentarily for game number 3. All right, guys, we're back. Yeah, this hand is like fine, but not good enough for this matchup. So, like, really, what I'm looking for in this matchup, like that first hand was a good hand. It was slow, but what I'm looking for in this matchup is like either just like a complete Goozler, good like artifact destruction cards, or at a minimum a hand that can kind of like play itself out relatively quickly, because I need to be worried about Time Twisters, and I don't want to lose so much. I don't want the Time Twisters to be like massive card advantage for my opponent. This hand's acceptable. We're on the draw for starters, so we could draw like another Dork or something like that, but it has a mana Dork, which means that like I can get a 3 mana play down on turn 2. I have access to my Loam, which if I draw like my Strip Mine, maybe I can lock them out, if I'm lucky. It's not a great hand, but it's also not one I think you pitch back. I'm going to fetch for a Bayou here, I assume. Yep. Play out the Hierarch. I think the Hierarch's a better play here than the Deathrite Shaman, because the highest upside play for them that like worries me the most is they play on a Time Walk. I just go ahead and cast 2 spells here. Cast out a Deathrite Shaman and cast out a Scavenging Ooze. They find a Tolarian Academy, but don't play out the land this turn because they evidently don't want to throw it. They don't want to put it at risk of being eaten by a Strip Mine or Wasteland on my turn. And evidently they're not ready to use the mana. So I've kind of liked how this hand's play down. I have a good card on top of my deck for starters, and I also have a decent clock on them right now. Unfortunately, they have a pretty powerful hand, it appears again. So like they Tolarian Academy, Frantic Search, after crop rotating to find Deserted Temple, untap the Tolarian Academy a bunch more times, find a Fabricate. I believe end up finding a Candelabra of Tanos to untap the Tolarian Academy to sack the Inventor's Fair to find a follow-up play of Mystic Forge. So I need to deal with the board right now. I could do one of 2 things. I can take like an Abrade and like deal with the Aetherflux Reservoir, or I can find a Strip Mine to deal with their mana. I do go past, I believe, a Demonic Tutor in this pile and a Braid. I think Demonic Tutor's too slow in this case. I don't really want to exile all my cards, but I think if you find Demonic Tutor, like you don't also have access to Life from the Loaming this turn, and I kind of wanted to actually Life from the Loam in the same turn that I that I did the strip mine play so I could have access to it next turn and not have to use the mana. Attack them for a bit of damage here. So they're kind of actually pretty limited right now. Like, they're not in a great spot. Because I've destroyed all their lands. They have one card in hand. They don't have access to a ton of mana right now. I've also exiled their most relevant land cards in deck, and I blow up their Aetherflux Reservoir here by using the Eldritch Evolution on one of my 1-drops to find Reclamation Sage and get rid of basically the only card that like gives them a hope of actually winning this game. Now on board they have access to like a significant amount of mana, but like the Lion's Eye Diamond is really only good for cards that go out of the graveyard. And I also have access to Scavenging Ooze. So once I start developing my mana base on the following turn, it's going to make it really difficult for them to get any value out of the yard, and they're going to lose access to a lot of their cards. Like at this point, they've already lost access to Trophy Mage, Teleria West, Tolarian Academy, Urza High Lord, and then Deserted Temple. I'm sorry. So Tolarian Academy is like one of the namesakes of their deck, like that plus Paradox Engine. And they've lost access to that, which I think significantly hampers their ability to win in the long game, especially even if they're able to get after like a Twister or something like that and get like significant amount of mana production. Like they're not going to have the mana production that really Tolarian Academy by itself allows you to kind of get after. Anyways, that was kind of how this game went. It was kind of a really tight game 3. Kind of 2 non-games in game 1 and game 2. We just utterly lost in game 1. Probably with the best hand of all the hands that we kept in this matchup, but like, it requires a pretty specific mulligan, a pretty specific hand to beat Tolarian Academy style decks with these kind of fair mid-rangey decks. And we aggressively mulliganed into them and or, just opened on a suboptimal hand that had an exceedingly good hate piece in it in game number 2. Quick pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily for more gameplay with Jund Lands Midrange. Alright, guys, we're back playing against Baylight, who's typically on Abzan. This hand's unkeepable. This hand's acceptable, but not inspired. I generally expect Baylight to be playing a more mid-range style deck, so I think this is acceptable, even though it's slow. It's very, very slow, but like I think it's a hand that you can keep against a player like him, because I don't think he's going to be like trying to kill me right away. He casts a Farseek, finds a Watery Grave. I don't find much of interest here. I could find a Mana Dork, but I opt to just blow up instead his Twilight Mire. I figure if he's using his second turn to Farseek, that his plays are probably not that powerful. I go ahead and dress him, knock out a Tainted Pact. Let me pause the game so you know what he had real quick. Knock out a Tainted Pact, but he had in his hand Noble Hierarch, Surak the Huntmaster, Huntcaller, and then Unearth. He goes ahead and cycles the Unearth. Correction, he actually gets back the Noble Hierarch, cast out a Dryad Green Seeker, which he drew for the turn, and that's his turn cycle. Turn gets passed back to me. I draw into a Dreadbore, which is a fine card. I go ahead and just play out this Renin 6, get back the Wasteland. Wasteland him again. Plan his next turn to try to Dreadbore plus blow up a land with the Wasteland here. So Dreadbore one of the threats. Cast out a Regrowth, finds back the land. I go ahead and get back this Wasteland, blow up his non-basic there. Blow up the Noble Hierarch. And then leave up access to Crop Rotation to find Strip Mine here. He cast out a Humble Deathrite Shaman. Kind of happy to draw a land here. This time around, I'm still going to actually blow up his lands that are in play, and then use the Dreadbore to kill off the Deathrite Shaman so that I'm not going to be losing my Strip Mine every time I use... or I'm not going to lose my Strip Mine if I try to find it here. Cast out a Winding Way, ends up finding a bunch of lands. Find an Abrupt Decay here, which is kind of nice. I just go ahead and Crop Rotation into the Strip Mine, get the Strip Mine back, and blow up multiple lands in the same turn. It precludes any other play that I'm going to have this turn, though. Still, they have a Blooming Marsh in hand, plus that Opulent Palace is drawn off Winding Way, blow it up with the Strip Mine. And now the real fear for them is they have to start actually attacking this Renin 6. If I get access to flashing back spells, like I'm probably going to kill this Green Seeker. They play out the Blooming Marsh. Just go ahead and get a Wasteland back. Blow up another non-basic. They find another fetch land here, which is pretty good for them. Draw Wasteland again. Just keep on blowing up their lands. None of this is really bad for me because I'm still going to be able to ultimate the Renin 6 at some point if they don't, continue to clock it. I just go ahead and blow this thing up because they have 2 fetch lands in play. It doesn't make much sense to try to blow one of those up with Strip Mine. It's pretty low value. Make an emblem here. Go ahead and put a Thespian Stage down, and I have crop rotation in the bin and 4 lands in hand, so I can actually crop rotate into a Dark Depths, and I can win it. Pretty much will here. Not at this turn because I don't have enough mana to do it, but next turn if I put a land down and crop rotate, I'm probably just gonna win. Anyways, we blew up enough of their lands. I think we blew up like 9 to 10 lands this game, which is a lot. But eventually they just went ahead and conceded. I mean, that's just a lot of attrition. Pretty impressive how many lands they were actually able to find in this game. But it kind of goes to show that it's a little harder just to lock someone out. But Ren and 6 does a pretty good job of presenting pressure in the form of like, hey, eventually I'm just going to start casting back all this nonsense that I've cast already. And at the same time, my hand's just going to pile up with like decent-ish cards to play. Now in this case, I don't have a lot of decent-ish cards to play. I have Plague Engineer and I have Greens and Zenith, so nothing really spectacular, but also nothing horrendous either. And I can still play spells, whilst my opponent cannot. Quick pause, guys. We'll be back momentarily for game number 2. All right, guys, we're back. Yeah, this hand's fine. It's got access to 2 tutors. It's got access to some fast mana. It just got Thoughtseize and lost like pretty much the card that brought the whole hand together, but that's the thing that can happen in this format. Sometimes you just get hand attacked. They also blew up my mana dork, which is not good. I draw another land. Also not great. They, I believe, play out a Cascade card. Yeah, Shardless Agent into Bitter Blossom. So I'm kind of in trouble now. I don't really have much going on. I've drawn into 2 lands over the course of this draw, which is not really ideal for where the hand was. I blew up the Treetop Village here. I could have just blown up the 2/2, but I think it's kind of likely they're going to have more green mana. And if I'm getting attacked by the 3/3 Treetop Village, I'm going to be in some trouble here. Cast on a Farseek. Don't do anything else relevant, though, to impact the board. I draw another land, and now I'm pretty sure I'm dead. I just blow this thing up to try to buy myself some time. It's possible I should have just played out Horizon Canopy and just fetched with it, or sacked with it. Just draw a card. Best draw in deck's probably a Plague Engineer at this point to kind of deal with these fairies. They play on a Leovol, which is also not great for me. It doesn't really matter that much, but it's not great. They have a ton of fairies. They play on a Varaska, the Golgari Queen. Blow up my elves. I try to draw a card here. I draw a card here, but it's another land. So I'm pretty dead here. I think I take another draw step and concede. Yeah, I draw a Lily out of the Veil, which is going to do utterly nothing on this board state. If I make them sack a creature, they're going to draw a card off of its targeted effect. If I say each player discards a card, well, they're going to lose a card out of hand, but they have a card engine in the form of Varaska, Golgari Queen, with a Bitter Blossom on the table. So, yeah, I'm very, very dead. I suppose like I could draw like a Toxic Deluge into an Abrupt Decay into like an Assassin's Trophy, and like they have nothing at hand. Pretty thin margin to win this game, so I just go ahead and pack it. And I think it's like probably less than 1% that I'm able to win this game, especially given this draw. Just draw a lot of lands. Sometimes you flood out, and that's a way you can lose games of Magic. So on to game 3. All right, guys, we're back for game number 3 against Baylight here. This hand is appropriate. Nothing spectacular, but it's also not bad. It's got hand attack. It's got filtration. It's got some board impact, in the form of removal, and it's got a decent 4-drop creature. I go ahead and attack their hand. So what I see is a Scavenging Ooze, a Tarmogoyf, one land only, a Nihil Spellbomb, and a Nature's Lore. So they kept a 1-lander, which it was a mold of 6, but it's still a little bit greedy. Oh, maybe it was a mold of 5. Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a mold of 5. So like the hand wasn't that greedy. It was a mold of 5 on the draw. So yeah, they just molded into Oblivion. Sorry, Baylight, I'm trying to misassess your hand. Yes, you molded into Oblivion. I find a Strip Mine here. I go ahead and Strip Mine them because they're on a 1-lander. Yeah, that means in general, since I have cards I can play, I'll probably win. If they don't draw pretty much perfect and hit lands each turn. Draw no Maelstrom Pulse. I could cast that on this stupid Nihil Spellbomb, but like I don't see a point. They're going to probably cycle it as soon as they can anyways. They find a fetch land here. I assume that probably EOT, I'm going to have a Nihil Spellbomb being used to fetch here. I probably should have just played the Nurturing Peatland out, as opposed to losing the fetch land in the bin here. I just go ahead and cast the Huntmaster out. Plan is to flip this thing back and forth a bunch of times and probably win through just sheer value. I go ahead and find Bayou, use the Nihil Spellbomb, X out my yard, and draw a card off of it. Find a Swamp, and then cast the Nature's Lore, which they have in their opener. I think it's really too little too late at this point, though. Huntmaster flips, domes him for 2. I got 6 power on the board, and have the ability to cast multiple spells next turn, if need be. They cast down a Bitter Blossom. Seems fine. Seems fair. Cast down a Scavenging Ooze. I just go ahead and Punishing Fire this right now. Go ahead and sack the Nurturing Peatland. Huntmaster flips back over. Find a Liliana of the Veil. Probably should have actually just... I could have cast spells here, but honestly, I don't really mind the Bitter Blossom. I'd rather them take damage off of it and flip the Ravager back over, and then I can reflip it on my next turn. They unfortunately have a Thragtusk, which is a little bit annoying, but it gains them life, and I'm able to get Punishing Fire back, which allows me to knock out this Fairy Rogue, which is going to allow me to either use the Liliana or the Pulse to just kill this Tusk. I didn't draw into an untapped land there, so I ended up just pulsing that. I could have Liliana'd it, but I don't think I'm probably going to want to discard cards here. I go ahead and hit him for 4, down to 4, flip the Huntmaster back over after having cast multiple spells, getting another 2/2. They cast down a Vraska, Glory Queen. Unfortunately, I didn't leave red mana up, so even though they gain life there, I'm unable to get the Punishing Fire back, which is unfortunate. Cast out a Plague Engineer to make their beast smaller. I eat their entire board with these 2/2s, cast down a Grim Lavamancer, and they take a look after they draw. I get back Punishing Fire here because they gain life off of Vraska. They go ahead and cycle an Unearth, and then just go ahead and concede the game. They evidently cannot deal with the board as it stands right now, so we end up getting them. Alright, guys, quick pause. We'll be back momentarily for the next game in these series of matches. Alright, guys, back for the last game I'm going to be covering here. This hand's unacceptable because it only has 1 land. This hand has 1 land as well that's tapped and only casts 1 spell in it. That's a 1-drop on turn 2 and does not have access to any good plays afterwards. This hand has no lands in it. And this hand is the first one we'll keep, but it's really bad. So this is a Mull the 4. Mull the 4 on the play. Not good, but this hand can function if it draws green mana. It's got a high roll a bit, but it is what it is. Draw to Tainted Pact, not the worst of draws. I mean, it's going to be able to find me a green source so I can cast this Birds and then hopefully get this Huntmaster down and maybe, if I'm lucky, win with it. Opponent's really not doing anything on their turn, so I'm kind of happy with this. Like, it's kind of setting me up to be able to win, possibly. I believe you just find a Misty Rainforest here. Yep. What did I exile? Exile Sylvan Library, Liliana of the Veil, and Scavenging Ooze. Go to second main. Fetch with the Misty. Find, I believe, Bayou. Just basic. Basic Forest, sorry. Yeah, I guess that makes sense because I'd rather not be stripped or wastelanded off of green at this point. That was a really solid draw. So I draw basically an answer to their Umezawa's Jit. I'm being a little greedy here. I could just blow up the Jit right now, but I kind of want them to play something and then equip the Jit to it so that I can eat up more of their mana. I go ahead and get a flip off of this Huntmaster here. They go ahead and I believe cast removal on it. Fire Covenant. Pretty good. Take a lot of damage off it though. I just go ahead and cast out the Reclamation Sage here. I might as well, cast this out to get a clock on them and also get some value by blowing up their 2-point card. They cast a Luxodon Smiter, which is a big boy. Big old 4/4. Good card. Draw to a land here. I'm just going to go ahead and play out this Eternal Witness and likely cast Tainted Pact, try to find like a Titania to get some board presence down. Obviously don't attack here. I'd rather not have my thing get eaten by a Luxodon Smiter. They go ahead and braid my 2/1, which to me is fine. I think there I would have just saved it, but to each their own. They cast on a Goblin Rabblemaster. It's around like 4-color blood. Like a 4-color like mid-range aggressive deck. I don't block either of these because my plan now has just been solidified to find Titania and put down bigger blockers against their board. Find a Bayou here. Go ahead and start looking. See Chandra, TOD, Courser, some Elves. There we go. There's Titania. Not too far from the top. Find a standard swamp here and end up playing it out because I want to play around like Mana Tithe. That's a possible card they could have. They're probably not running it, but, why get blown out by it? The hidden information is pretty minimal value. I'm going to leave back the Rex Sage because I would like to be able to block the Rabblemaster itself with the Rex Sage because it trades pretty well with it. They go ahead and play out a Butcher of the Horde. I think here, so they give it haste. I think here one of the things they probably want to do is sack this Gabo in response to it being, generated by the Rabblemaster to give their Butcher of the Horde lifelink as well. I get pretty lucky and they don't do that. which I think would have made a big difference in this game specifically. I draw into one of the best cards in my deck, Kolaghan's Command. Get back the Huntmaster of the Fells, gain 2, and put 4 power on the board. Attack for 7 here. Putting them down to 5. Now they're kind of in a tough spot. They go ahead and attack me for 5, down to 5. I'm kind of happy to see that I'm not dying this turn because I can't block the flyer very well. I go ahead and flip the Ravager of the Fells. Draw into Wall Blossoms, which I'm going to go ahead and cast out here to see what other options I can get, because they have a lifelink land that could possibly muck me up in combat if they have another removal spell. I actually find a pretty optimal card. Entomb does not look like a great card to draw here, but it actually is, because if they fire up the critter land, the 2/3 lifelinker land, they'll be able to eat one of my threats. Like, they'll probably just... I mean, I guess they could have to chump block. They have to chump block like the Titania. But they'll gain 2 life, and what I'm able to do is actually, in response to them blocking, I can entomb Punishing Fire, so that I can mitigate the life gain off of the Shambling Vent if they, like, block, like, the Titania and then, like, remove the 4/4. So they're able to live at 1. Then I can entomb for the Punishing Fire and then just kill them anyways. So Entomb was actually a pretty solid draw off of the Wall Blossoms there to find Punishing Fire in response to any life gain shenanigans. Anyways, guys, quick pause. We'll be back momentarily for game number 2 against Aficionalis. Pretty rare that you see a Mull to 4 get there. We got very lucky this game. I think we kept an appropriate 4-card hand. I think we mulliganed correctly down to 4 as well. But I think we also had to get very lucky. But it's pretty rare to see happen. It's kind of cool. So we'll be back momentarily for game number 2. Alrighty, guys, back for game number 2 against 4-Color Blood. This hand is dicey, but keepable. The reason I think this hand's keepable is because they didn't really show themselves to be like the fastest versions of 4-Color Blood. I do need to draw mana here, but I have access to a 3-drop plus Eldritch Evolution. I have a 2-drop I can play. Eldritch Evo is going to give me access to Titania, so if I draw any fetch land, it's going to be quite good. And if I draw like a 4-drop, then I can just get my Primeval Titan, right? I just can't cast out the Collector Roof. It stops Umezawa's shit, but really at the end of the day, it's just a 2/2 beater. I don't really care if it dies either. Just going to play it out. They play out a Kitchen Finks, which is fine. I draw into a Scavenging Ooze. Not great. Just play it out here. I attack them, see if they want to trade. It wouldn't be a good trade for them, but it's a trade they could make. They play out a Falcon Wrath Aristocrat, which is pretty good. They're going to hit me for 7 this turn, and I'm kind of lamenting that I didn't leave the Collector Roof back. I go ahead and draw perfect. Sometimes you mize, right? Find the Badlands with that fetch land there. Go ahead and Garrick here, untapping the Badlands, casting out a Collective Brutality to try to get a sorcery and also kill the Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. I go ahead and get them for 4 here. At this point, I do not have the ability to use the Scavenging Ooze. They draw pretty well themselves and find a Eternal Witness to get back the Vampire Aristocrat. I'm sorry, Falcon Wrath Aristocrat. I go ahead and get my Eternal Witness, untap 2 lands here. Go ahead and collect our correction. Go ahead and Eldritch Evolution to find Titania to get back my fetch land as well, which gives me 10 power in play. Go ahead and attack with the Collector Roof. I don't mind trading it off here. It's not really doing anything. And I have a Maelstrom Pulse to deal with like a Jit. It'll get a hit in, but it's fine. Go ahead and get it 5/3. They go ahead and bolt the Titania. I think actually Titania is a good card, but I think honestly here, like maybe it would have made more sense to actually bolt the Ooze. I go ahead and ooze the Kitchen Finks away. They play out a Rampaging Ferocidon, but I have an answer to that. I go ahead and pulse it, untap 2 lands, exile the Ferocidon, fire up the Treetop Village, hit them for 7, puts them on a 2-turn clock and says, hey, block my cards. They don't have the cards to block my cards. They can play out like a Vampire and like hit the Garruk, but they're still dead to the backswing. So we kind of just go unchecked here. And I think really it's the mana advantage from Garruk that kind of helped us win this game. The pressure presented by Garruk, forced attacks, and the mana advantage gained by Garruk over 3 turns was, I think, enough to kind of put us ahead in just developing over our opponent in this matchup. Anyways, guys, that's going to be the last game that I'm going to cover. Hannah had a decent variety there. Had some bug reclamation, had some academy, had some blue-black tempo / midrange, had some 4-color blood here. Played a significant number of matches with this deck, and like I'm kind of happy with where it's at right now. I've had a lot of fun building it and kind of finding the identity. Like I don't want to say like identity because people have built Jund decks before, but like kind of finding like how Jund functions disparately and distinctly from Abzan lands in a way that is beneficial given specific metagames. And against fair decks and in fair metagames, I think this deck's really good. I think it's a really good choice. I think it gives you a lot of options in how you want to play. Honestly, it's just really fun. Like, I do think it probably needs to have more points in it. I think it probably needs to be running a Vampiric Tutor, so that goes up to full 10 points. I think that would still just be a good add, because it's just, gives you a very specific card you may need out of the deck. But at the end of the day, like, the deck still functions just fine with this base shell, with like the 8-point build that I've got right now, and is still very capable of winning a lot of games of Magic, given decent decisions and decent keep decisions, decent play decisions by the pilot. And yeah, it just has really great, efficient cards that exchange really good value over the course of a game. So I definitely had fun building it. I've definitely had fun playing it. And it's probably something I'll continue to tinker on, because I enjoy building decks in this format. I think they're really cool to explore. Anyways, guys, enjoy and take care now.